What happens when a teacher shames a student for bad grades, only to be shocked by his story? Let's dive in to see. In the heart of Chicago at Westwood High School, there was a teacher named Mr. Callahan. He had been teaching math for over 20 years. He was known for his no-nonsense attitude, his strict grading, and his belief that success was earned through discipline and hard work. Among his students was a boy named Daniel Carter. He was 16, quiet, and often sat at the back of the classroom, never raising his hand. He rarely turned in his homework on time, and when he did, the work was often incomplete. His test scores were some of the lowest in the class. One afternoon, Mr. Callahan stood at the front of the room, handing back a recent algebra test. "Some of you did well," he said. "Some of you didn't." He stopped at Daniel's desk and placed the test paper face up. A large red 36% was scrawled across the top. The class chuckled. Daniel lowered his head. Mr. Callahan sighed. "Daniel, you need to take this seriously. If you keep going like this, you'll never amount to anything. Do you even care about your future?" Silence. Daniel clenched his fists. He wanted to disappear. "Do you even try?" Mr. Callahan pressed. Daniel remained silent. He swallowed hard, holding back the frustration and exhaustion welling up inside him. That night, unable to sleep, Mr. Callahan went for a walk near his neighborhood. As he passed by a small 24-hour diner, he stopped in his tracks. Inside, wiping down tables and refilling coffee cups, was Daniel. His eyes were tired, his movements sluggish, but he still managed a small smile as he handed a plate to a customer. Mr. Callahan watched as Daniel glanced at the clock, sighed, and pulled out a small notebook, scribbling math problems between serving customers. He looked exhausted. Curious, Mr. Callahan continued watching from outside. A little girl, no older than 6, sat at the counter coloring with worn-out crayons. Daniel walked over, ruffled her hair, and handed her a small cup of juice. "Almost done, Lily. We'll head home soon." Mr. Callahan's heart sank. The realization hit him like a truck. Daniel wasn't just struggling in school, he was working late nights to support his family. The next morning, Daniel arrived at school expecting more of the same. But as he sat down, Mr. Callahan approached his desk and placed a fresh test paper in front of him. "I want you to retake the test, Daniel," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Not for a grade, just for you." Daniel looked at him, skeptical. "Why?" "Because I should have asked what was going on before assuming the worst, and because I believe in you." Daniel stared at the paper, then at his teacher. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. From that day on, things began to change. Mr. Callahan stayed after school to help Daniel with math, while Daniel taught Mr. Callahan about struggles he had never considered. One afternoon, while reviewing a math problem, Mr. Callahan asked, "What do you want to do after high school?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't know. College sounds impossible." "It's not. It might be tough, but there are scholarships, grants, people willing to help. You've got potential, Daniel. You just need a chance." Daniel had never heard those words before. It stuck with him. As the weeks passed, Mr. Callahan noticed a change in Daniel. He started participating in class, asking questions, staying after school for tutoring. His grades slowly improved, but more importantly, his confidence grew. One day, Daniel walked into class with a bright smile. "Mr. Callahan," he said, holding up an envelope. "I got accepted into a community college. They're offering me a scholarship." Mr. Callahan grinned. "Daniel, that's amazing. You earned this." At the end of the semester, Daniel's grade rose from failing to a solid B. At the end of the year, during the graduation ceremony, Mr. Callahan watched as Daniel walked across the stage to receive his diploma. When their eyes met, Daniel gave him a small, grateful nod. Mr. Callahan smiled. After the ceremony, Daniel approached him. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan, for everything." "No, Daniel, thank you. You taught me more than any lesson in this classroom." In the end, Mr. Callahan realized something important. Teaching isn't just about equations and grades. It's about understanding, listening, and believing in the potential of every student, no matter their circumstances. Years later, Mr. Callahan received an email from Daniel. He had graduated from college, earned a degree in engineering, and landed a great job. At the bottom of the email, one sentence stood out. I wouldn't have made it without you believing in me." Mr. Callahan leaned back in his chair, smiling. That was the greatest grade he had ever received. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to comment below and subscribe. Goodbye.